Welcome into another edition of Indiana Football in Review on HoosierIllustrated.com. John Alden, Mitchell Paige with you as always. As Indiana, most recent result, losing to Purdue in the old Oak and Bucket game, 35-31. But honestly, I'm just going to go ahead and get this out here. We're not here to talk about the game this weekend because obviously something more immediate has happened, and I know we talked about it on the last iteration of these videos, is that we hoped that Indiana would have made a decision on the future of its football program and the leadership of the program at the end of last episode, and that is exactly what has happened. Early on Sunday, it was announced that Indiana was going to move on from head coach Tom Allen. They had the buyout money and they pulled the trigger. And, we're kind of really right in the thick of what happens after you fire a head coach. We've already had a few important pieces jump in the transfer portal. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the candidates that Indiana is likely going to be looking through as they navigate the beginning of this offseason and, more importantly, the future of their football program and its leadership heading into a new era of college football. So welcome in, buckle up. We've got quite a few things to talk about here in this short amount of time. As I said earlier, Mitchell Paige with me as always. Mitchell, just share with me, if you will, kind of your thoughts on, you can talk about the game if you want, or just talk about maybe the tenure of Tom Allen and maybe what you expect from the program as they make this transition into whatever the future holds.
Yeah, I have kind of a unique perspective on it. Like I played for the previous guy, but got a season with him, with Tom Allen, for my senior year. He was the defensive coordinator. I played in the Foster Farms game, his first game as head coach. Feels like forever ago, but I kind of got to see what he was preaching and to see a defense that was not great during my 4 or 5 years there. Really buy in to what he was preaching, the whole LEO mantra. That was started my senior year and obviously exploded into kind of the mantra of the whole program when he took over. Had some of the most exciting seasons that Hoosier fans will remember, but it really just came down to it. It felt like they were never able to put it together. I'm not going to dwell on the Purdue game, but it always felt like it was either the players not getting to the or being in position, being coached to get there, and then being coached correctly and in the right position and not making the plays. And then other games, it felt like we just were lost and not coached correctly. It just never felt like the players and coaches were together and on the same page. Purdue was a prime example of that. I thought Indiana was in great positions all day. I thought they were really good on offense. Sorsby was fantastic. Donovan McCulley, who I'll talk about later when we talk about the transfer portal and the importance of keeping some of the guys on campus. But their defense is in the right position, felt like 100% of the time, and just didn't tackle. It was a stunning. I tweeted that I thought we were getting punked. I was waiting for Ashton Kutcher to come out and say, like, yeah, psych, this is not actually happening. We do know how to tackle. But that was just a summation of his entire tenure, man. An awesome guy that I think the players really loved and fought hard for. But at the end of the day, especially with the new wave of college football and the money that's going to be pumping into the Big Ten, hopefully the program can do a little bit more in terms of investment, but feels like, and you mentioned it, a fresh start as we get into a fresh start for the conference. It could be a good thing. So I thought they would keep him. That was my feeling throughout the whole season. But now that we're here, let's talk about what happens going forward, because it is now November 26th. The portal officially opens in just a couple days. So they're going to need to hire somebody, probably get a full staff, at least the main pieces, before the next weekend.
Yeah, it's crazy to think.
Yeah.
You would like to think that Indiana, and I do believe this, I do believe Indiana, as they've seen the last couple of weeks progress, specifically since after the Michigan State game, I feel like the administration likely was already planning for the dismissal of Tom Allen, and I'm sure they've already been in communication with potential candidates. We'll get into some of those in a few minutes. And again, we don't know who's been interviewed by Indiana, but just people that a lot of others are speculating, and personal ones that at least I'm interested in. Some Mitchell may be interested in as well. But one more thing with Tom Allen. He finishes his Indiana tenure with 33 wins, 49 losses. Obviously, the peak of his tenure was the 8-5 season in 2019, where they went to the Gator Bowl, and then the 6-2 season in 2020, the shortened 2020 season, where they went to the Outback Bowl. So I guess with that being said, Mitchell, you've already talked transfer portal. We've got coaching candidates come on. I'll go ahead and start with the things that we already know, and that's 3 players for the current Indiana team. At least 3 players of note have already come out and said at the time of this recording, I'll say, because
7 p.m. on Sunday, the 26th. I assume when you're listening to this, there'll be 45 guys.
Yes, because tomorrow, this is when this will get released tomorrow, unless Alec has other things in mind. Maybe he'll put it up more quickly. Who knows? But at the time of this recording, there are only 3 guys in the portal, but there are 3 guys who intend to be in the portal, I should say. And that is quarterback Brendan Sorsby, and quarterback Dexter Williams II, and Miles Jackson, defensive. What is he? A defensive back?
Edge, linebacker.
I know he came from UCLA whenever he transferred to Indiana. But those are the 3 names.
I was hoping he was going to be like Miles Jack, but he did not turn out to be like Miles Jack.
So obviously the big takeaway from that is, off the bat, Indiana's only got, to my knowledge, 2 scholarship quarterbacks on its roster currently, with Brock Lowry and Taven Jackson. Taven Jackson, a name that was already in the transfer portal, obviously, and was competing for the starting job against Brendan Sorsby for much of the season this year. It wouldn't surprise me really at all if he sticks around, considering he's already jumped in the portal and used his one-time transfer, unless he was able to get some sort of waiver from the NCAA. So don't expect Taven Jackson to jump in the portal, I wouldn't think. I could be wrong about that, but that would be my assumption. But again, with any change of the guard, whether it be for positive reasons or negative reasons, you're going to see a massive influx of players, more than likely, jump in the portal, especially because a lot of guys, I mean, they love Tom Allen. They were Tom Allen's guys. You saw a lot of former Indiana alums who were Tom Allen players trying to vouch for him yesterday after the loss to Purdue. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a bunch of these guys get in the transfer portal. But again, one of the first things that the new regime is going to have to do is try to keep as many players on this roster as you can. And if not, then you're going to have to do your own fishing in the transfer portal. And they're going to have to do it anyway, but the more or the less of it you have to do for your own team, the better, because this is an age in college football that this will be the first time that the Indiana football program goes through this kind of transition in the era of NIL and the transfer portal. And it'll be a wacky ride. And I'll go ahead and shift it back over to you, Mitchell. Just thoughts on some of the guys who are already in the portal, guys who you maybe want to see stick around, and, you know, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think the important thing for fans to understand is, yes, it's the first time that we haven't had a coach when the transfer portal opens. We'll probably have a coach, I guess, but he'll be on the job for 2 days when the thing finally opens. So there'll be a feeling that it's time to panic, because I'm guessing 60% of the roster will at least dip their toes in the transfer portal.
Of course, you can always withdraw, of course.
But yeah, but look at any program. That's happening everywhere. Guys transfer out of Alabama, just like they transfer out of UCF, just like they transfer out of Tulsa. Like there's guys in the portal all over the place. There is little to none allegiance to the team on the front in today's world for most guys. And that's just the way that it is with the money that's being passed around. There's NIL deals all over the country that these kids can go chase. So the reality of it is there's just a lot fewer guys that are playing for teams because they love the university. A lot more guys are playing because of the situation that they're in today. And if the situation changes, they can go find the old situation somewhere else. And that's just the way that it is. So you're going to see, especially with a new coach, that these guys don't know. They aren't sure where they're going to fit in the pecking order, probably get an entire new staff. Not entire new staff, hopefully. Hopefully they keep some guys. I think Rod Carey was fantastic. Hopefully we can find a way to keep him on as an Indiana guy. But you're going to see just a bunch of people enter the portal, and they're going to make their silly posts, thank my fans and friendly, or fans, family, friends, and God, and I'm entering the transfer portal with 2 years of eligibility. Like, dude, you were 3-9. Like, there's not really any highlights to post. I don't know. That's why I'm kind of, if you want to leave, okay. I'm not. There's a couple guys that I think we should really make a push. Donovan McCulley being at the top of the list. I think he's a game-changing player that's only starting to come into his own at like just scratching the surface. He's got all-world kind of potential, and there are going to be some big teams, particularly in the Big Ten, but I assume from outside the conference, that are going to come asking some questions about Mr. McCulley. But everybody else, and I'll probably catch some heat for not saying somebody like Jalen Lucas, but I think he adds a nice wrinkle, but I don't think there was a way to get him involved enough to roll out the red carpet like they did for him last year. I think he made a couple game-changing plays, but on offense, whether it was us using him incorrectly, running him up the middle, or just in the option game, I'm just not sure. I mean, it seems obvious to put him in the slot, and fans are not smarter than the coaches. The coaches definitely tried that, and there's a reason that we didn't see it. So I think McCulley on offense is somebody that you really, really need to do everything you can to keep him on campus. And then on defense, I don't know. I think Aaron Casey would have been the only guy, but he's obviously gone. Correct me if
even if he does have eligibility, I mean, he's primed. I mean, he won't get drafted super high in the NFL just because of who he plays for. But I mean, he can have a career in the NFL depending on if he can make a roster or even get drafted late in the later rounds of the draft. So he's somebody who, if he doesn't have any eligibility left, he might as. I mean, obviously you can transfer, but test the NFL waters. Do that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think we're just gonna have a completely new roster. When we said fresh start, it is going to be truly fresh start. We're going to have new faces, new coaches, new identity probably, and we'll have to figure out what that is. I think we just started to find out a little bit at the end of the season, but I think it's an exciting time. There's never been, I saw this tweet, I don't know who it was from, but the Indiana job has never been more
a prettier job,
desirable, yes, than it is right now. I think it was Zach
Osterman who said that. I could be wrong though.
He's a smart guy, so if it's him, he's correct. It's never been more desirable to coach at Indiana. We're heading in a direction that there's going to be 2 major conferences, and Indiana is fortunate to be in one of them. But I wouldn't count on that being the case forever. I think that you have to show some fight, particularly in football. That's where all the money is. As I've said a bunch of times on this show, all the money for these athletic departments come from football and the TV contracts for football. So Indiana has to find a way to be competitive in the new conference. I don't think they're that far away, especially now that we're divisionless and you can't strike 3 losses right off.
You no longer have the requirement of playing an extra Power 5 opponent in the non-conference.
Exactly. So there's
Power 4, I should say now, since the Pac-12 will be no more.
Yeah, there's a lot to be excited about. I haven't convinced myself that we're going to win every game next year, but I'm not
by
far
the time
off.
August 31st rolls around.
I'm not far off. I think that we're just it's an exciting time for Indiana. I think if Tom Allen was the coach, I would probably still feel the same way, truthfully, just because of the way that the Big Ten is changing. But it does add a little bit extra wrinkle of excitement because you just don't know, right?
Yeah.
It
Just some
maybe it is,
mystery surrounding
yeah,
the new head
maybe it's
coach,
just
whoever that might
blind
be.
faith that I've been relying on for however long since I graduated. But the blind faith is back, and I'm really excited for where we are as a program. Um, don't panic about the transfer portal. That's just the way it is. We're going to look brand new next year. We're going to have a quarterback probably that we've never seen, have
Yep.
no clue. I mean, just when you talk about the transfer portal, Will Rogers from Mississippi State, who destroyed every record they have at that school, and Dak Prescott plays quarterback for the Cowboys, was pretty good there, and Will Rogers just blew his records out of the water. He enters the transfer portal. Like, these guys are in the portal all the time. We're going to have a quarterback that comes from another school that we aren't sure about. No one's going to know going into spring practice. We're going to not know who the quarterback's going to be until opening day, probably. And we're going to be right back to where we were. But I think that it's an exciting time. I truly do.
It is. No, I'm excited as well. And again, nothing at all against Tom Allen. I have nothing but good things to say about him as a human being and the way that he was able to, turn the program around for a couple of years and bring positive momentum to the program that I feel like the next coach is going to be able to feed off of, at least at the beginning. But we'll have to wait and see. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into. I've laid out at least 3 of the candidates that I think Indiana will look really hard at. You can find lists anywhere online, from any publication that you desire that will be able to share their thoughts on who Indiana might pursue. But we're just going to talk about a few of them. First up, I'm going to mention from the MAC, from Toledo, Jason Candle. He spent 9 seasons with the Rockets, and he's gotten 60 wins, across those 9 seasons, including 3 seasons of 9 wins or more, 2 of them of 11 or more, and he's got a couple of bowl victories as well, 2 different conference titles. And a lot of people, whenever you bring up, the trendy MAC coach, it's usually somebody that's only been around for a couple of years. And I'm going to go and use this example. Daryl Hazel, whenever he was hired away from Kent State to go to Purdue. I know a lot of people think like don't hire the MAC coach because of something like that. Daryl Hazel, that hire was based off of 1 good season where he won 11 games, and he was only there for 2 years. He was 5-7 in his first season, 11-3 in his second year, and then obviously we saw what happened to him at Purdue. Jason Candle is somebody who's been around long enough where he's been able to establish who he is, obviously, who he is as a coach, what his identity is, but also he's gone through good years, down years, and been able to get things back rolling after having 1 or 2 down seasons. And nothing majorly down. They never had a season where they won less than 4 games. And so I would say, in terms of veteran coaches who have proven themselves at one program, Jason Candle is somebody to definitely look out for. The one, and there's obviously more than one con, but the glaring thing that sticks out to me negatively with Jason Candle is that this is the only place he's ever been a head coach at the FBS level. So he's never experienced Power 5 or Power 4 football, and this would be kind of an experiment in that sense. But if you want somebody who's been loyal to his current program and may show, I guess, similar desires, or maybe wants to, move up a little bit in the college football chain, Candle is somebody that I think will be at the top of that part of the list.
Yeah, I think him, as well as the coach at Eastern Michigan. I had forgotten
Chris
about
Creighton.
him.
Yes.
Yeah, those 2 are kind of similar to me. I don't think they're the sexiest hire by any stretch. But
and Indiana's not going to get the super sexy hire of the pit. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be very wrong, but I'll let you finish. But I don't want people to think that the expectation should be to go hire, the Brad Stevens of college football, that kind of thing.
No. I mean, there is some realistic, be realistic chatter that you could definitely talk about. But we already mentioned this is as desirable as Indiana has ever been. So I think that you should probably try for someone a little sexier. I think maybe Jason Candle's been great at Toledo. I think, they're 11-1.
You're currently 11-1, yes.
Yeah. Former Indiana defensive back Tim Bennett is the defensive backs coach on that team. So I followed them a little bit for whatever reason. That was my roommate in college.
He likely would come with Candle on his staff to Indiana, you would think.
I would think, especially with his connection to Indiana. But I think there's some other names out there that I would want more. But somebody like Jason Candle or Chris Creighton, they've proven it. They've run their own program. They've kind of taken the reins of something that wasn't a Ferrari, and especially Toledo turned it into a Ferrari and had some sustained success, some longevity. It's not a flash in the pan, catch lightning in a bottle. How many cliches can I use? He's had some longevity. He's had some sustained success at Toledo. They're a semi-powerhouse in the MAC. So if that is who we decide is going to be the head coach at Indiana, I'm not booing it by any means. I think that shouldn't be our first guy that we reach out to, but would be a really good hire. There's going to be a lot of teams vying to talk to Mr. Candle about being the head coach of their program. And I think hiring him at the end of the day would be a good hire.
And I've got to say this, the more we say the word Candle, the more it just sounds weird to say out loud. I'm not talking about, I keep wanting
to say Campbell. And that's going to take some getting used to. That's probably just my dumb brain.
But I've already seen a couple of jokes about, wax and being on fire or something like that, because of his last name. But,
yeah,
it just comes
fans,
with the.
That's probably from fans. Fans are dumb. I'm a fan. Of course. I am dumb.
We're dumb. Yeah.
Yeah. I only know because I'm a fan too. I am also dumb.
Mitchell, if you want, I know you said that's not who we should first reach out to. Do you have, you've already, since we talked before we recorded this, and you know who the other two I'm going to say are. If you want to throw anyone out there that I'm not going to mention, feel free to do that. You want to go and throw one of those out there?
This is a name that no one's really talking about. But I was talking to my dad earlier, and my dad, for whatever reason, has he really does his research and kind of sees things a little differently than a lot of people. And I know that's everybody says that about their dad, but it's just interesting. He always seems to have a unique perspective. And a name he threw out was Tom Herman from Florida Atlantic. Used to be at Texas, was really successful at Houston, got basically run out of Texas because they didn't win the national championship and he didn't get Quinn Ewers. But I don't think that is the worst. That's a guy that's had experience at the top of college football. I don't even know how good they were this year.
They're 4-8, so underwhelming. But again, it was his first season after being removed from college football for 3 years.
He was with the Bears. Yeah. So he's got experience in the NFL. He's, again, had really successful teams at Houston, was at Texas, has the reins at Florida Atlantic, probably a reach, probably not somebody they're going to go after, and maybe a little out there name to throw into the pot. But I think it could be an interesting conversation. I could be persuaded to think that that's the best hire of the bunch.
It would be a unique hire and an unexpected hire, and I don't think there's any reason to think that it would be – I mean, it would be out of left field in the sense that nobody's really mentioning it. But there's also a fit for it too. It's somebody who had a lot of hype whenever he was at Houston and had high expectations with the Longhorns. And it's weird saying things didn't work out because in their 4 years, like you mentioned, they'd never won less than 7 games. They won all of their bowl games. Yeah. But again, at the standard at Texas is different. And obviously different in Indiana, but if he's able to have any sort of success that he had at Texas, at Indiana, I mean, he would be considered, they'd raise a statue for him more than likely. If that was
four seasons of 7 wins or more. I think one year they were 9-3,
10-4.
Yeah, and they're beating teams with big names and ranked teams. I know it's Texas. It's a little easier to recruit to Texas, but I don't know. I think that's an interesting flyer. I don't think it's somebody that's at the top of the administration's list, but I think that's the most interesting, intriguing name that's come up that I've heard. And it was only from my dad.
That's a cool, that's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah.
Got a couple more. And this one, most Indiana fans, especially recent Indiana fans, will be familiar with. Kane Womack in South Alabama was the defensive coordinator for Tom Allen during their two most successful seasons, 2019 and 2020. He was also a position coach under Tom Allen the season before in 2018, but since then took over at South Alabama. First season went 5-7, won 10 games in 2022, went to the New Orleans Bowl, and then this current year they are 6-6, and will be playing in another bowl game. So interesting. It'd be interesting in the fact that, I mean, yes, he had success as D coordinator. You could say he's had mild success at South Alabama. Obviously, the one really, really good season last year, but would be a hire that fans would be, I would say, definitely excited about at first when they remember what he did at Indiana. I don't know what the expectations would be, if I'm being honest, long term, because we've seen what he can do defensively. A lot of people will probably think, oh, it's just somebody from the Tom Allen tree. It's going to be their defensive guy. Will he be able to have a good offense? I think that will probably be the biggest question mark if you move forward with somebody like Kane Womack. Will he be able to have or house a good offense and make those two mesh? Because the biggest thing that we've seen from Indiana football over the last decade is with one coach, you will have an amazing offense and a lackluster defense. And for most of Tom Allen's tenure, it was the opposite. You have a wonderful defense with an offense that can barely sniff 20 points. And I would say a lot of that changed this year towards the back half of the year when they switched offensive coordinators. At that point, it was too little too late, you could say. But Kane Womack is exactly, I don't want to call him a super big mystery, but it's an up-and-coming talent that will be unproven at the Power 5 level, similar to Jason Candle. However, obviously, Candle's been around a lot longer. But the difference here between those two, other than their longevity, is the fact that he has Indiana ties. And what I mean by that is, like, he was already on the coaching staff. And so other than that, really, Candle and Kane Womack are fairly similar in a lot of ways. So those are, and again, maybe they're too easy, safe candidates. I know, Mitchell, you're kind of leaning more towards the let's get the sexy guy. And that's, again, I respect the desire to get somebody like that, and maybe Indiana can, and maybe they'll throw the kitchen sink at somebody like that. But in terms of, in my opinion, what are more realistic, I think.
I just don't know. Kane Womack, yeah, he has the Indiana ties. His defense was as about a fun defense to watch as I've seen, bringing all kinds of creative blitzes, getting defenders,
disguising coverages.
Yeah, places that you're just not used to seeing them. They were really fun to watch on defense, but this is going to sound worse than I mean it. It kind of has the Darrell Hazel to it.
Yeah, because it's only 3 seasons. Darrell Hazel had the one really good season.
Yeah,
at Kent State.
At this point, if there was no conference realignment and everything was just business as usual as it had been for the last 30 years in the Big Ten, Kane Womack is a guy you could really get excited about. But at what feels like a really critical juncture in Indiana football and the Indiana athletics program in general, in terms of the amount of money that can be made, the national exposure that can be had, it feels like you need to have somebody that has probably experience running their own program in the Power 5. That's what it feels like to me. And that maybe isn't 100% correct, but there's going to be so many things changing. A guy that's kind of learning on the fly with how everything is really going to change, the travel times, preparing for all different. It's a completely different landscape in the Big Ten. I would just prefer someone that's got a little more experience at a big time level, preparing for the best teams in the country.
The one thing I hate saying this because I feel like it feels like I'm putting Indiana in the sewer, and I don't want them to be in the sewer. But the toughest thing for Indiana when it comes to finding somebody who already has Power 5 experience, you more than likely aren't going to get someone who currently has a Power 5 job. With the only exception being somebody who is at a big-time program who's about to get fired or maybe was just fired. I think one example I've seen is Dan Mullen, who did really good at Mississippi State. He did decent at Florida, and then I guess had a couple of semi-down years in terms of Florida standards, kind of similar to Tom Herman in a way. But in terms of getting somebody who has a lot of good Power 4, Power 5 experience, that's just a lot. Your pickings for that are a little thinner because I feel like the most likely people for those positions are guys who are they're trending more downward, if that makes sense.
I don't know if I agree. The writing's on the wall. The ACC and the Big 12 are just not the same conferences as the Big 10 and the SEC. They're just not. It's not Power 4. There's eventually going to be
Power 2 plus a couple of extras. Yeah.
Yes. So a team like, I don't know why this is the team that pops in my head. I don't even know who Boston College's coach is, but a team like Boston College that's a Power 5 team and probably a little more respected as a program than Indiana. Now all of a sudden Indiana becomes a lot more enticing because of the ability to be in the Big 10. It's going to be the biggest stage in college football. It vaults Indiana into a little bit different stratosphere. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to get Dabo Swinney or Mario Cristobal or somebody like that, but some of these middle of the pack, like a coach at Pittsburgh, middle of the pack that have some good seasons, have some down seasons in the ACC or in the Big 12.
It's not a bad thought.
It becomes a little more enticing. And maybe we aren't quite there to where you see what the landscape's really going to look like. And maybe that pitch is a little tougher to a coach in a position like that right now. But I don't think it's crazy to think it's a possibility.
This wasn't originally on my plan to mention this guy, and I'm getting him up real quick, but I can't think of his name. Washington State's football coach, Jake Dickert. And he's only been there for 2 years. But the reason that you're talking about Power 4 or Power 5 jobs, that
his
would
program,
be enticing. Yeah, they're not going to be a part of the Power 5. So it's almost like he needs to jump ship and find a good landing spot for him.
You saw the Oregon State guy go to Michigan State.
Yes,
and Michigan State, I would argue, is in a much bigger state of turmoil than Indiana.
Yeah. Now, Washington State hasn't had, or Jake Dickert under Washington State hasn't had the most impressive tenure. 3-3, 7-6, 5-7, but they did beat Wisconsin 2 years in a row. I mean, Indiana just beat Wisconsin, so what is that to sniff about, I guess? But I mean, that's just another one of those names. That wasn't, again, I wasn't initially mentioning.
But that's the kind of, I don't think Indiana is considering a guy like that, but that's the kind of name that he's a coach at Washington State 2 years ago. It doesn't feel like a move from being the head coach at Washington State to Indiana is necessarily on the same level. Whereas now it's definitely on the same level and maybe even an upgrade. So I think if the administration's any good at their job, that pitch, now that I'm saying it out loud, is really not as hard as I initially thought. I think, hey, do you want to come play for millions and millions of dollars against the best teams, the biggest brands in college football, and potentially have your name in the mix? Like a program like Nick Saban, we'll talk about Alabama. Nick Saban is not going to be around forever. They're going to get somebody from somewhere. You think when he retires in 5, 10, however many years, they're going to get somebody from the Big 12 or the ACC? Not a chance. They're going to get somebody from the Big 10 or the SEC, probably the SEC. But with the way that conference alignment is changing college football, there's really going to be two kind of super conferences. And do you want to be early in it? Do you want a chance to start with Indiana, that's in a state of a little unrest, but with the ability to amplify your career in a way that you never could have in a different conference? I think that that conversation can be had with a lot of coaches out there. And I think more than the Indiana fans are open to admitting.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's just wishful thinking.
No, honestly, I love doing. I mean, I hate the circumstances. I hate seeing coach get fired, but I love the process of figuring out who is the best fit for the program that you root for, because everyone's throwing out names, everyone's throwing out their own ideas on who could be the best, and nobody has the right answer.
Yeah, I think there's a sector of Indiana fans and college football fans as a whole that probably not as much as they want to win, but close second, like just talking about coach speculation. They want their teams to win, but as soon as they don't, they're already on, let's find the next guy. And that's like water cooler talk. And that's unfortunately where Indiana is right now. But it is funny. Everybody throws in their 2 cents as soon as an opportunity like this opens up.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. All right, one more name I'm going to mention.
John. What do you think? Maybe they'll hire us.
Imagine an Alden Paige duo where I'm just the guy who talks and you're the guy who makes all the decisions.
That's fair. That's fair. I probably need to stay away from the media.
All right, I got one more name I'm going to mention, and obviously this is run a little longer than normal, but we've had plenty of things to dive into now that we're at the end of the season. And this is current Duke, and this honestly, this may be completely out of the realm of possibility for multiple reasons. One being, and Mitchell, you're the credit to you. You're the one who brought this to my attention before we started recording. This is for offensive coordinator at Duke, Kevin Johns, and he was obviously the former offensive coordinator for several seasons under Kevin Wilson. Indiana had one of the most prolific offenses, along with Kevin Wilson. And Mitchell, you played underneath Kevin Johns, so you're very familiar with that. But it was brought to my attention that it will and again, this is also speculation, with Mike Elko likely going to Texas A&M. And by the time of this recording, he may be announced as the head coach of Texas A&M. I don't know for sure. There is probably a very strong chance that somebody like Kevin Johns would get elevated to be the head coach at Duke. And again, that's just all speculation. But if any program is going to make that kind of a move, it's a program like Duke, especially if things are on the upward trajectory. So I do think it's an interesting name to throw out, though, for Indiana. When you consider his ties to the program, and if you want to make that change from somebody who is defensive-minded to offensive-minded. But granted, he was a part of a program that struggled defensively. So would Kevin Johns be able to bring somebody along who could find that balance for Indiana and make them competitive on both sides of the ball? So those are just my thoughts. Mitchell, I'm sure you have your thoughts, especially since you have a personal connection with Kevin Johns and what you would like to see if he would be the head coach at Indiana, or, maybe there's better things on his horizon.
Yeah, I would. If I had a perfect world, Kevin Johns would already have been hired. He's my favorite person on the planet. I wanted him to marry my wife and I. Like, that's how highly I think of him. You get kind of the same. Tom Allen had a great reputation for being just a good person and being great in the community and great with the fans and great to the media. And Kevin Johns is exactly that as well. He has an awesome family, just a true coach through and through, lives, breathes football, but I think a little quieter than Tom Allen. And by a little, I mean a lot quieter than Tom Allen. You're not going to get really any emotion out of him ever. But I don't think, unfortunately, for Indiana and me and really the entire fan base, I don't think it's a possibility. I really want him to get the job at Duke. I think just he's finally got, and this is a little background into him, he's finally got his family up to Durham. His son's going to school. He's got 2 kids in college. I think he probably just wants to wait until his youngest son graduates high school before he makes a move. So I think the ideal thing for him would Duke doing the right thing, the smart thing, and promoting him to head coach. But I don't know. I do want him at Indiana. I've asked him probably 10 times just this year if he would ever come back. And each time he just greets it with a small laugh and moves on to the next thing. So
I love that. It's funny. Well, there you go. Just that we've gone rattled through a number of names, and there's several others that people have mentioned. One weird one that I kind of thought was interesting at first, and the rest of these I'm going to name we're not going to talk too much about because we've gone way too long. But it would be more underwhelming, and I don't really like this guy's personality, and that's Paul Christ, who was formerly at Wisconsin, one of the most, I don't want to say boring human beings, but
I don't even know
somebody
what he looks like. That's so bad. I have no clue.
He's the kind of, I feel like he wouldn't really get fans excited for the program, and maybe he would. I don't, again, winning cures everything, but he's just the kind of coach that I mean, yeah, he's had success at Wisconsin, but I do believe Indiana beat him. That was who Indiana defeated whenever they went to Wisconsin in 2020 and got the win at Camp Randall. So he's one that people are mentioning. Willie Fritz at Tulane. I already mentioned Dan Mullen. I already mentioned Jake Dickert. Charles Huff at Marshall. Sean Lewis, offensive coordinator at Colorado. Barry Odom, head coach at UNLV. And most of these that I'm naming have come from.
Who's the OC at Washington?
Current OC at Washington. It's a good question because obviously Kalen DeBoer is the head coach who, is the mastermind of the scheme that for the Huskies. I do not know who their offensive coordinators. But here's the thing with Washington, it's interesting because a lot of the credit goes to Kalen DeBoer and of course Michael Penix, especially when you've seen what both of those guys did at both of the schools that they were at when both of them were together. So I don't know how big of a factor Washington's offensive coordinator is. I'm trying to figure out his name real quick.
Ryan
Grubb. And I don't know how long he's been on so here's the thing. Ryan Grubb was also the OC on Kalen DeBoer's staff when he was at Fresno State.
He was the first hire for him at Washington. Yeah.
So, and I would trust Kalen DeBoer's judgment and, hiring somebody good on the offensive side. So, and that could be another wild card, the OC of Washington. So any closing thoughts on really everything we talked about, Mitchell, before we wrap this thing up? Obviously, it's been a long season. Plenty of, I would say, ups and downs, but really we haven't had that many ups. And for me, I'll go ahead and say this too. I was very surprised to see Indiana only win 3 games this year. Not that I expected them to be competing for, an East Division championship or anything like that, but there were plenty of opportunities this year where Indiana lost 1-score games, especially in this back half. You lost to Purdue in a game where you were leading most of the time. Michigan State, a game where you had that game won until the final couple possessions. And then overtime in Illinois, another game where you were leading most of that game, lost that in overtime. And taking you back a little bit further, the Louisville game where you came back and had a chance to punch it in to either send it to overtime or go for 2 and win that one. And I'm not even mentioning the Penn State game where you had absolutely no business winning that game, and that one doesn't go your way. So really, the narrative I feel like for this season has just been, what ifs, I guess.
Yeah,
a lot of what ifs.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard season, man. College football is hard. It's hard to win. Unfortunate situation that Indiana's in, but as I said, I think it's an exciting time. There's so much going on in college football. Hopefully we see some true buy-in from the administration. I think that they've taken the early steps required, and I believe that there is going to be significant investment, and maybe that doesn't necessarily mean a brand new stadium or new indoor facility, but some of the things behind the scenes. I think that now's the time, and I'm excited to see where we go. Well, as I said, we'll probably know before December who's going to be leading Indiana going into next season and the start of the new look college football. And I'm just excited, man. It's always it's I'm trying to think of the word for this. It's
I'm excited too. Go ahead.
Yeah, just being an Indiana football fan. I mean the
What a life we commit to.
Yeah, the gauntlet that you get to run through every fall. Still, the people that are dedicated to the Hoosiers and people that interact with me every once in a while on Twitter, they're the best fans in the world. They know sadness more than pretty much everybody. So hopefully have some good things to look forward to going into next year for us and for everybody around the program.
Yeah, a lot to be excited about. And I know I feel like I've been a little more pessimistic than I normally am today. That's not how I'm trying to come across. Maybe it is. But I mean, I am excited, just to be clear. Like there's a reason that a couple of weeks ago I mentioned that this program needs a fresh start, because that is a way to have a piece of positivity heading into the next season after a firing like this. So I'm happy to see that. I hope the administration makes a move that will, pay dividends for the program and for the fans. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. And I feel like, I don't know this for sure, but I do believe we will at least try and do another Indiana football and review episode after Indiana makes a decision on who they're going to hire going forward. And from there on out, I'm not sure when we'll check in. Maybe we'll do a spring football update, especially once the transfer portal closes and we can see what they have and what potentials is on that roster. We may check in there as well. So, but thanks for tuning in all season. Again, thanks for Alec and Kyler for allowing us to do this and for sharing the Out of Touch podcast on their site. Hopefully you guys who listen to this have checked that out. If not, do so, because we do those every week. Those won't stop. We have a lot of fun on those. So check out A Touch on Spotify, on YouTube, subscribe. Still trying to reach 100 subscribers by the end of the year. So a lot of good stuff. Thanks as always. And we will talk to you next time.